Going through the layers of hell, bloodshed seems to always follow in the wake of V1, as do many of the places that have a history of death and destruction. One of these places is the layer of violence, which naturally lives up to its name as a dangerous place, where the halls are painted with blood. However, the seventh layer of hell is more than just a place where cruelty is enacted, because the corpses of violence tell a story of war, a story of cruelty, and a story of how mankind's petty conflicts would end up becoming their downfall. So let us begin at the start of these blood-stained hallways, with the Garden of Forking Paths. The imagery for this maze is quite unusual, even for the standards of Ultrakill, as the layer opens with a field filled with crosses, which could allude to a graveyard at first. However, the true meaning opens as we go into this maze. Inside, you're greeted by the mannequins, which seem like unassuming statues at first, but you know what happens next. After you've exhausted the other two options, you take the right path and are once again greeted with the cross, however with some sort of tree in the middle. There is also a book which provides some more background on the layer, explaining the true meaning of the cross and further encouragement to continue your crusade. The unending halls of the garden. So dutifully decorated by the cross, the symbol that angels use for the tree of life. They praised your beloved Father who had planted it and filled us with the dew of its leaves and the nectar of its fruit, that which gives us life, courses through our vein. For you, however, are truth. Our bodies are not a vessel for the blood of the fruit, but its prison. The beautiful guts and gorgeous bone yearn to be shown and seen, splayed under the divine cross of the tree of life. We pay it tribute through the art of out. The world is your canvas, so take up your brush and paint the world red. In this world, the cross is a symbol of the tree of life, the nectar of which is implied to be the blood. This could be an explanation of machines gaining sentience. However, this is mere speculation. What's interesting is that in the next paragraph, the author is seemingly asking for death, which could be seen as another ritual, but could also be interpreted as the sinners in this layer asking to be free for their suffering through death. However, another fears that this is hell, asking you to kill everyone here. The second theory is later supported by a detail in the terminal entry for the primary enemy of this stage, the mannequins. These crawling abominations are created by a combination of sinners getting caught lacking and damns being unreasonably cruel, as a garden of forking paths is designed for you to get lost in as much as possible, as the halls would be similar enough to give no sense of direction, but just different enough to grant no familiarity, as the terminals outright say. After these sinners roam around the maze and get tired enough, they would be torn apart limb by limb and get shoved into statues, turning them into fuel for the mannequins, with no way to control their body or die by their own will, which still would not be a good option, as violence would also cover punishments for people who kill themselves. To further reinforce the impossibility of escape, there's another slab that elaborates on the absolute terror of violence. Dead end after dead end. Is there really no way out? Get lost in the labyrinth, die in the battlefield, or get lost in the forest. I thought I saw a way out there, a gate carved by foliage. But even with all our strength, we couldn't get through. I doubt there's any blade sharp enough to cut the vines, and the only fire that could burn through it would need to be hot enough to melt metal. This book tells that no matter where you go, there seems to be no escape, as horrible fates will await you in any ring of violence, whether it be getting lost, killed in a battlefield, or turned into a mannequin. The only escape seems to be a gate that's blocked by foliage that can only be destroyed with fire that can melt metal, which is mainly just a hint on how to enter the secret level rather than any real world building. Moving on, we later find out the mannequins aren't the only type of demon roaming around this labyrinth, but rather the Minotaur joins in. This gives the layer of violence more connection with its original inspiration in Dante's Inferno, as it would roam around as further punishment for those in the first rank, consisting of those who are violent against others. But that's enough subtext. Let's highlight why it's here and not with Minos. The Minotaur was created by an unknown figure, which we don't know for sure who it is. All we know is that this nightmarish bull was created as a gift to King Minos, which he showed great gratitude for his present and took care of it really well until... Nah, just kidding. He took one look at this abomination and decided to send it to the Garden of Forking Paths, where it would roam and eventually decay. But that's it for this first layer, which only really serves as an appetizer for what's to come. But what could be more horrifying than a creature made by stuffing another living being into a statue while they're on the verge of death? Well, let's just say this punishment wasn't first enforced by hell, but rather humanity. The next section of violence starts out with more of the same palace imagery that we've come to expect. However, when you finally go to see what's outside, you're met with another new enemy, the Gutterman. This giant hunk of metal that you'll be getting very familiar with for the rest of this stage is also the very first war machine, ending the era of trench warfare in the final war. The Gutterman also marks the beginning of machines fueled by blood. However, humanity had no clue at the time how to keep blood fresh inside a machine. So what did they do to fuel it? Strap a live human in there and keep it barely alive. This was such an inhumane act that hell itself took notice and decided to copy their homework to make the mannequins. But after you kill your first Gutterman, you then look outside and witness the horrors of war. Light and gunfire fill the air, giant machines fill the horizon, and a river of blood crosses through the piles of corpses. This river can also be linked back to Dante's Inferno, as in the first ring of violence, the boiling river of blood called the Plegaphon serves as a punishment for those who reside in this ring, as they are immersed in the boiling blood. To further this connection, if an enemy falls into the river, the style meter will tell that they have been boiled. During the level, the enemies will be mainly dropped through different rockets, which are implied to be from the earth movers in the distance. However, they don't just throw enemies at you, but they also commit British 9/11 to try to stop you, meaning that they see you as an active threat, which will be important later. There's also another book in this layer, but it's more recapping what we've already know, like the sailors attempting to escape violence, and the solution to getting out of the maze without triggering the enemy spawns to complete the challenge. But later we find another war machine that has been sent down to this infernal layer, the gutter tanks. Gutter tanks were made as a countermeasure to the Guttermen. As you can see, they are manufactured by different countries, with the Guttermen being Russian and the gutter tanks German. Judging by what we can see in gameplay and what the lore tells us, the gutter tanks did their job very well, with mines being able to easily break the shields and their weapons were able to finish the job. Guttermen became obsolete along with infantry in general, causing an arms race between different types of machines that extended the war for 200 years. This also caused incredible fan for everyone else that wasn't fighting, as everything was going towards the war effort. It also explains the design of the revolver and shotgun having infinite ammo, as resource efficiency was probably at the highest priority. One final thing to note in this final war is that probably was just World War I, but instead of things going on for a couple years, we invented robots and extended the conflict for 2 centuries. There was a time period to consider, as V1 was invented near the end of the war, and its firmware reads the year 2112, which is 200 years after the start of World War I. But it's also further supported by the method of trench warfare in the Gutterman's terminal entry, a tactic prominent in World War I, and the furthermore naming of the war. As before World War II, World War I was called the War to End All Wars, which means the same thing as the final war. At least we weren't using humans as live fuel anymore. The last thing that's worth mentioning about this level from a lore perspective is the enemy composition, as almost every enemy in this level is either a Gutterman or a gutter tank. This could be because Akita wants to show off his fancy new enemy type, but another possible reason that's because machines were committing most of the violence for the past 200 years. However, most of the 200 years infantry wasn't present in the war. That is, before the gutter tanks made it so humanity wouldn't be needed, meaning that only 2 machines would logically be in the layer are the Guttermen and the gutter tanks. as those are the only two types that would fight humans on the battlefield at one point. But that's about it for its layer. Let's move on to something less horrifying. I said less! With 7-3, it may look like it just starts with another typical spooky forest, but that's just how bad it is on a surface level. We already know that 7-1 and 7-2 are partially based on the first ring of violence in Dante's Inferno, so naturally the next levels will be based on the next two rings. 7-3 is specifically based on the second ring, dedicated to those who have committed violence against themselves, which is a fancy way of saying that they killed themselves. Or squander what they have, but mostly killed themselves. And how do they punish people who wasted God's gift of life? By turning them into trees that feel incredible pain from their branches being snapped off. Do I even need to explain the connection from here? Moving on from that, we end up encountering the gate that can be only accessed with fire, and move on to this. Nobody exactly knows what this tree thing is yet, as it's not explained in any capacity, so this next part is pure speculation. My theory for what the blood trees are is that they are strange perversions of the Tree of Life mentioned in the Garden of Forking Paths. As well, the Tree of Life provides life by giving blood to vessels. These trees straight up make new life with the blood, which is Hell's way of twisting it for punishment. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory, if you will. Besides that, we still have the typical bombings from the Earth Movers, as you can even see one in the background. Hi, Benjamin. What isn't typical is a new infighting in the level. During the level, the enemies will battle each other rather than just gunning towards you, with certain powers emerging in the battles. Primarily, the battles will be demons fighting against the machines, reminding you that you're not the only one gunning it for treachery. Another cool detail is that the machines don't teleport in like the other enemies, as they will just be there at the start, showing that these machines aren't controlled by Hell. To further this even more, the gutter tanks and the Gutterman at the end of the level aren't spawned in typically. They're dropped through the ceiling through the same drop pods as usual. However, let's say you think that infighting makes level too easy. Well, if you really want to give yourself a challenge, well, consider marking yourself for death, which removes the balancing factor of the old encounters that it must fight 50 enemies at once. This is basically suicide unless you've grinded the game, which is thematically appropriate with, well, the Suicide Forest. After killing the final Gutterman and gutter tanks into Earth Mover has drawn at you, I think it's safe to say it's about time to solve the problem, and that leads us to the final battle of violence. The battle against the Earth Mover takes place in a sea of burning sand with fire raining from above, which alludes to the third ring of violence, which is made to punish those who have committed violence against God. But what else constitutes as an act against God himself, when there's already a layer dedicated to heresy? Simply put, violence against nature and art, which then the Earth Movers have committed the ultimate crime. These titanic machines were the final machines deployed during the final war, as they were able to level a city and are nearly indestructible from the outside, instead requiring someone to raid the Fortress of Steel from the inside. The Earth Movers would ravage the Earth, leaving the land inhospitable and causing humans to make homes on the back of the metal tyrants. However, there was one main problem with the Earth Movers: fuel. Not only did they require blood for them to function, but also sunlight. With all the destruction they caused to the world, the sun was shrouded by smoke and soot, causing the Earth Movers to choke on their own sands. Due to the death of the Earth Movers, large-scale conflict was no longer possible due to the reliance on these titans, and the 200-year war had ended, with humanity doing its best to undo the damage they've done, as the street cleaners were invented to clear the skies once again. The Earth Movers, in the sense of how much damage they've caused to nature, serve as the foulest act against God, and Hell rejoiced at what humanity had created, as one final book written in the red text of Hell could be found as a tribute to the Colossi. This is the only way it could have ended. War no longer needed its ultimate practitioner. It had become a self-sustaining system. Man was crushed under the wheels of a machine created to create the machine, created to crush the machine. Samsara of cut sinew and crushed bone. Death without life. Null or Boris. All that remained is war without reason. A magnum opus, A cold tower of steel. A machine built to end war is always a machine built to continue war. You were beautiful, outstretched like antennas to heaven. You were beyond your creators. You reached for God, and you fell. None were left to speak your eulogy. No final words, no concluding statement, no point, perfect closure. This is the only way it should have ended. But with how massive and powerful the Earth Movers were, why were they so bent on destroying you? Even while the two Earth Movers clash, the second one still decides to continue to throw more enemies at you in a last-ditch attempt to end your journey through hell. Notice how I said the Earth Movers were the last machines to be deployed, not created. V1 was the final machine of the final war, but the last never got to see the light of day, nor the terror of war. It was previously stated in the Gutter Tank's entries that every machine made during the war was made to counter the previous dominant machine. With V1 being the last machine made before the war ended, this could only mean one thing. V1 was made to kill the Earth Movers. Its speed, regenerative abilities, and overall efficiency at killing was perfect for taking down a Titan, hence why both Earth Movers make a great effort to make sure that V1 doesn't get to fulfill his purpose. Other than that, there's nothing else in this layer to discuss. That is, except what isn't there. Any mentions of Gabriel. In every other layer, Gabriel has been mentioned or present in one way or another. In Limbo, he was alluded to being some sort of savior. In Lust, it told the exact opposite story, showing how he struck down Minos and put the layer back into ruin. It's the same pattern in Act 2, as he kills Sisyphus in greed and saves the ferryman in wrath. There's also Gluttony and Heresy, where you directly fight him. It could be argued that Ultrakill is a telling of Gabriel's story rather than V1's, but Violence is where this all changes. It tells a story of the final war, and therefore everything leading up to the creation of V1. There aren't really any main people mentioned either. It's not a tale about humanity or certain people rising to the occasion. Violence is a story about death, destruction, war, famine, conquest, and most importantly, violence. It also makes the layer more personal, as V1's journey has also been one of violence, so going to the layer that he should have been to would, of course, be a more horrifying experience. While all the other layers had tracks that made you feel powerful, the music of Violence all has some sort of tragic feel, at least until the Earthbrewer, where you finally get to fulfill your original purpose. It's interesting to see Ultrakill try to go in a story direction more centered around V1, as every other chapter has been about Gabriel. Overall, this layer has some of the most interesting and well-written story elements in it, and I'm excited to see what Hakita will show in Fraud and Treachery. Thanks for watching, tell what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.